Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. Today, I'm delighted to have with us the co-founder and CEO of PolyAI, Nikola Mrkšić. And Nikola, I probably pronounced that pretty wrong, have I?
That's pretty decent. It's
okay.
It's as good as it gets.
Nikola, I know you're originally from Serbia, so fantastic, and you're in London, and you've been here for a long time now. Yeah. Can you give our listeners, because you've got an amazing business, really interesting, can you give our listeners a little bit of insight into who you are and tell us more about PolyAI, please?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. I've been in the UK for 10 years now, went to Cambridge, met my co-founders, Sean and Eddie there, and we started PolyAI about 3 years ago. We are a conversational AI company based in Clerkenwell in London, and we work on building voice-based personal assistants, right? So things that can help you book a restaurant or, amend a reservation, amend the flight, deal with technical support. And it's really all about creating voice experiences that people enjoy interacting with and, that can actually help us deal with, an increasingly services-based economy where not enough people want to work in contact centers.
Yeah. And look, there's an evolution of these solutions that have been coming in, and they're getting better and better all the time. What sort of customers would benefit from your service, and where are they generally based?
Yeah. So, our early customers are in the UK and the US. And anyone with a large customer service operation can benefit from deploying these technologies. If you think about what old school touchstone or DTMF IVR solutions did, kind of like press 1 for this and 2 for that, and maybe they'll tell you an answer before they pass you through to a human, and maybe you get to solve your problem before you even have that conversation. Similarly, we build another layer of defense, which are basically automated agents that can deal with any simple request that you have and that you have at scale, right? Mm-hmm. So if an automated agent deals with those, you leave the high value tasks, maybe those where you can even generate some value for the business rather than just solve a problem. You leave that for the actual human operator who can do a better job. And, we'll never automate humans away. There's an invaluable element of human empathy when dealing with these tasks, right? And when someone's really upset about something that happened, with a product or something else, you do want to have a human on the line. But there are a lot of mechanical things where we can deal with it automatically. And if we try really hard, it can be a good experience. Maybe in some cases even better than what you can get with a human.
Amazing. Right. Well, we're going to jump straight into the questions. I'm sure we've got some more things that we're going to bring up as the questions go on. I know as well, I think you've got around 35, 36 employees based in Clerkenwell in central London. So that's fantastic and growing quickly, and had fund, Series B or Series A rate.
We raised a seed round and then a Series A as well. So
fantastic. Mate, well, congratulations on that. And
thank you.
It's an exciting product. Why don't you share with our listeners what a typical day in the business looks like for you?
For me, frankly, this is a cliche. No day looks similar to another. There are days where I'm in with the team, and I speak to a lot of people, from product to engineering. There are days when I'm out with clients, with investors, partners. So it's pretty diverse. And frankly, about half a year to a year ago, I completely lost control of my calendar. And one of my ops managers, Ash Hazel, she now manages my calendar. And I think I'd be pretty lost without that.
Fantastic. It was interesting. Someone else said that yesterday to me about one of the real value add, and that was having a great EA, executive assistant support.
It's incredible. One of our investors sat me down when I went. I actually went fundraising with them for their fund around Scandinavia. And the guy, who is a very, high up experienced finance professional, sat me down and just said, look, if you don't do this, you're actually bleeding value, and you're not doing a good job as a CEO. And I, at the time, thought it was quite uptight, that it didn't make much sense, that it's that you're quite a wannabe if you go and hire someone to help you with that. But it's actually an incredible ROI.
So just touching on that, because there might be other founders or growing businesses listening to this. What was it like to let go on those first few weeks?
Honestly, if there's any advice I can give that is universal, it's hire the first ops manager as soon as you have reasonable funding, because, you know, up until probably a bit more than a year after we started, I was collecting receipts, I was liaising with accountants, I was doing a number of things that just sap my time continuously. And the thing with building a company is it's really hard, right? And you will take any small victory you can get. So compiling a list of receipts and sending it to your accountant, and it's a paradox, right? That's a task that feels really good because you've done something, right? It's not a hard problem. You do it, you're happy, right? And you should get that out of your workflow as soon as you can. And I think like calendar management is the next thing after that, where if you do it smartly, you're actually gonna, you know, do tasks that, you know, decision making in the morning, and you're more creative in the afternoon, where, you know, you're a bit tired, and that's when you can kind of like let loose and have maybe some longer meetings where you know, think about product ideas.
So who's had an impact on you, perhaps as a leader, on your journey so far? Has anyone had an influence on you, and how have they influenced and shaped your life?
That's a hard question. I mean, there have been a few people that have had pretty strong influences on me. One would definitely be my PhD supervisor, Steve Young, who is one hell of a guy. He was the pro vice chancellor of Cambridge while running his third company that he sold to Apple, and in parallel he was running a research group, and, you know, he's one of the most cited researchers in the history of speech recognition. So, you know, when you look at someone like that and everything they've managed to juggle, you know, you'd feel ashamed to say that, you know, your work is hard. Yeah, a few other guys that have been quite influential as advisors to me during like our time at PolyAI. For example, Chris Mayers is a venture partner at Entrepreneur First, and he's given me some really good advice, and he's a great listener, and he's really good at giving you kind of like tailored advice to your personality, understanding yourselves, early employees, how to navigate those personal relationships. So that's really important.
Fantastic. What do you do from the top to keep your team engaged?
That's quite a high level question. I'm not sure how to answer it. I think that, you know, where I'm still involved is product, and I think that's kind of like one of the central pieces of at least a B2B enterprise AI company.
Yep.
I think that, well, I mean, as CEO, it's kind of like your job to know about everything, and you do a bit of everything and nothing in particular. I think that it's really important to imbue a lot of energy downwards, and, you know, it's your job to stay motivated, to have answers, or to make sure that you can motivate people to get to those answers. You need to spend a lot of time with people, right? It's a lot of people in your company are doing jobs where they're trying to figure their roles out, to figure out how to add value, how to do things well, and, you know, people can do with some encouragement on the way. And as CEO, sometimes it's your job to figure it out, but often it's just your job to encourage them, you know, to figure it out.
What's the biggest challenge that you see facing business leaders right now?
I wouldn't know about that.
What's the biggest challenge you see in your industry right now for business leaders?
Yeah,
in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think like for people who we are approaching and having conversations with, it's about how to deploy AI effectively, right? How to actually take these convoluted propositions that kind of work well in demos and don't really work in practice, and how to get the best, you know, how to figure out the right strategy around deploying an AI solution that could save them a lot of money, for example, or just, you know, unlock something new. I mean, that's just one of many challenges. I think that, you know, there are interesting discussions to be had about the impact of these kinds of technology on the workplace, you know, on the economy. But, you know, I think the different business leaders have very, very different concerns.
That's a great point, by the way. And just going back to that, what is the expected time length of that return of investment when you're implementing your kind of solutions? Because I guess that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it does. And look, I think that it can be anywhere between, you know, 6 to 18 months or maybe even longer. And then, you know, if you're working with a contact center operation, which is very complicated and convoluted, often you don't even have the right data points to tell people what the ROI will be. And frankly, if it's a big operation, the ROI is there, right? How much, when, a bit more difficult to say. And often, you know, what we have to do in, you know, what we call discovery is just really chart it out and sync their notation with our notation. And that can be quite difficult.
Mm. And I can think straight away, just again in your industry or the industry you're serving, just even that first initial contact as a customer, having some kind of engagement rather than waiting hours, time on the phone or listening to some hold music or getting frustrated because you can't get through to people. So
Yeah.
a lot of opportunity there. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
I don't know if I have a good answer to that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have.
What would you share with someone based on your journey so far that you think, that was, or someone said to you and you think that's really useful to me?
I think a really important thing, at least if you're like an early stage startup entrepreneur, is to have a great co-founder, right? And I think that that cannot be overstated. And Song Chen, my CTO, and Eddie Su, they've been really good all along the way. And people with whom you share the journey and you figure it out together. And I think that I admire solo founders, and I don't really know how they do it, especially not first time around. I don't know if that's kind of like
No, that's great advice
that you were looking for, but yeah.
That's great. It's like a marriage.
It is a marriage. I actually think it might be, slightly
more
involved than a marriage.
What's exciting you in your industry right now? We touched on a few things, but what's really exciting for you right now?
Well, I mean, look, the industry, the conversational AI, virtual assistants, it's huge right now. And if you look at Amazon alone, Alexa's got 14,000 people. So they're trying to completely revolutionize the way we're interacting with technology, and in many ways we'll be a part of that. I think that how we're trying to lead that charge is bringing it over to businesses, effectively communicating it clearly, having a clear ROI, and having people who've spoken to our system chuckle at the end of the conversation. That's something that's really important for us, because frankly there have been very few use cases of this technology that have permeated into like modern society. One would be playing music on a smart speaker, and the other is getting directions for navigation in your car because you can't use your phone while you're driving. But we can do a lot more, and we will do a lot more. So it's just a matter of like identifying those next few things. And what I'm really excited about, and it's a paradox, when we started PolyAI, I was just out of Apple. My co-founders had worked at Google, Facebook. We didn't think that we'd end up working on customer service. And we went from thinking that it's a pretty dull affair to thinking that it's actually the best battlefront for deploying these kinds of technologies, because you have real people with a real problem, and technology should be there to help.
Yeah, great answer. Is there a story that you've got from your childhood that influenced your work ethic in later life?
That's a really good question. I mean, look, my parents were divorced. I grew up in Serbia that was first under sanctions, then bombed by NATO. When you see a lot of that stuff, I think that it instills a certain kind of spite and resilience that, you kind of carry throughout life. And there's a good Serbian word called inat, and it literally means succeeding in spite of other things. And I think that my generation of Serbs, and a lot of my friends have gone pretty far in life, exactly because they were trying to do things in spite of those elements. So my parents were divorced. My mom worked really hard to get me through to get me to learn English when I was a kid, right? She it was 1994. We were in hyperinflation and international sanctions, and she was using her last savings to get me private lessons for English, saying that the ROI on that will be high. And I have to say she was spot on. But I think that her grit, her passion about me making the right choices is something that's still kind of one of the biggest inspirations. And if who's inspired me, I think that probably I've taken more from my mother than all the business leaders that we could talk about now.
Well, that's lovely to hear. What do you think the industry, we've touched on it a little bit, but what do you think the industry is going to look like now in 5 years' time, if you can see that far ahead? And how do you think that might impact your business model?
Oh, that is so interesting. So, I mean, there are several layers of the industries we're working in, right? The top level are the great powers with their aircraft carriers, i.e., personal assistants, right? And those things are heavily funded now, and it looks like they're going to continue to be very heavily funded. And that's like just really great for the whole ecosystem because it means that we're getting a lot more people into it, and a lot more people are thinking about how to crack those problems. I think that if you go into like a smaller granular level, there will be fewer startups building chatbots. And frankly, it was a bandwagon, a hype that probably peaked around 2017. And we thought that everything's going to go to chat, right? Because we can do it, it's convenient. The assumption was, and I think this was a pretty bold assumption that we, the younger generation, had, people don't like talking on the phone. But frankly, I mean, chat is not that effective, right? And we've seen it grow from maybe 10 to 15%. And even our generation, when we've got a real problem with, an appliance or something like that, well, you know what? We tend to pick up the phone because it's a lot faster to tell someone about your problem than to, spell it out on a keyboard on a smartphone. So I think voice is here to stay. And I think when you look at the kids today who have grown up with Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, they're very good at knowing their failure modes. And these things keep improving, but it's also about knowing how to use them. I think in a way that our generation has gotten really good at using Google as a search engine, these guys will be better at interacting with voice assistants by asking questions in the right way. So I think it's all really exciting. And there will come a point where more of us will have smart homes. There will be a few other killer use cases emerging, next to playing music and navigating in your car and a few others, where these things will really get embedded in our daily lives. And it's a really important question is like, what medium will we be using? And I guess what next after smartphones is a really important question to ask when you think about the importance of these technologies. And the really crucial thing here is, I think, augmented reality and the ways that we will use those kinds of devices. And companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Magic Leap have done a lot of work here. And if you have you tried any of those prototypes?
Magic Leap, I've had a go on.
Yeah.
They've disappeared a little bit, off the radar a little bit, but maybe they're somewhere.
I've tried the Magic Leap device, and I think that some of the things I've tried there are spectacular, right? For example, the Paint app, I forget the name on the device. I spent my childhood playing with Microsoft Paint. I thought it was a really, really fun thing to do. And frankly, if I'd had the 3D version, I would have never taken the headset off. So I think that, how voice assistants become a part of that is going to define how they, progress in the future. They will be important, but I don't think we know exactly how yet.
I'm really pleased that you said people still like to pick up the phone, so that's good.
Okay.
Final question for you: if you had your time again and we're giving your 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would you say to yourself looking back now?
I'm quite happy with how it all went. I don't know if if you interfere with the past and give people feedback, they might behave differently. I think that I would have maybe just encouraged myself to be even a bit bolder earlier around the things that I was really interested in. I think that, for example, here in the UK, we're not courageous enough at just like finding the exact industry that we're passionate about, seeking out the startups that do it, and just getting in touch. People, if I get a really thoughtful email from an undergrad right now who has looked at PolyAI and have something to say about the field, even if they're not the strongest technically, if they've not got the shiniest resume, but if they've actually thought about it and it's clear that their place is here, they've got a job, right? And I think that people underestimate that. And same is true for academic research, for getting into the right research group. And I think that just like even more direct initiative and being very ambitious about directly reaching out to the people you want to be working with, because often they're perhaps just looking for exactly someone young and zealous and as passionate and ambitious as you. So you should just go and reach out to them straight away. But do put some effort in it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And look, we're going to wrap up now. And thanks for answering the questions. There's a lot of questions there, so thanks for coming on them. I know you got a dog in the office. Do you have a dog in the office there? You said?
Yeah, she's called Fig.
Fantastic. So is everyone allowed? Does Fig spend a lot more time at a certain person's desk? Do you have to share? Do you have to share, Fig?
Well, you'll laugh. I think what we've seen so far is the people who feed Fig pork scratchings tend to be very popular with Fig. I think our chief operating officer Yen has definitely won the #1 spot at potential detriment of Fig's health, but we'll see how it plays out.
Well, look, I know you're growing, and you got if you haven't checked it out, go obviously to PolyAI's website and have a look at the career opportunities. If they want to reach out to you, connect with you, or find out more about the company, Nikola, how can they do that?
Nikola@polyai.com.
Easy. And of course, Ash, your wonderful assistant, will be picking that up as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you want to listen to more exclusive tips and life lessons from our guest, go to the resources page at vineresources.com.